Jake's Saturday began like any other, with the quiet hum of his apartment and the comforting warmth of coffee in his hands, but a simple text from his mother-in-law, Linda, changed everything. Asterisk, could you help me move some things this afternoon? I can't manage alone. Asterisk, the words were casual, almost innocent, but when he read them, something in his chest tightened, a mix of anticipation and unease. He told himself it was just a favor, a simple act of kindness for someone who had always treated him with warmth, yet a small, restless curiosity stirred within him. Arriving at her apartment, he found boxes stacked like miniature walls, their contents hinting at years of memories, books with worn spines, framed photos of smiling faces, and small trinkets that seemed to tell stories he would never know. Linda greeted him with a smile that was both familiar and subtly different today, softer somehow, tinged with a vulnerability that made Jake pause. As they began moving boxes, their conversation flowed naturally, light at first, filled with laughter over minor mishaps and shared frustration when a heavy dresser wouldn't budge. Yet between the trips to the car and the careful lifting of fragile items, their glances lingered a beat longer than necessary, their words carrying an undertone of unspoken connection. The afternoon sunlight slanted through the windows, bathing the room in golden light, and Jake noticed how it highlighted the gentle lines of Linda's face, how her eyes seemed to glimmer with emotions she didn't voice. For a moment, the air around them felt charged, a quiet tension neither acknowledged but both felt. As they rested for a break, sipping water and wiping sweat from their foreheads, Linda turned toward the window and sighed, her gaze distant. Jake. I don't know why, but it feels nice, having someone here who cares, she admitted softly, and Jake's heart skipped in response. Her words were simple, yet they resonated deeply, stirring emotions he wasn't prepared to confront. The moving task, mundane in purpose, had become a delicate dance of connection and subtle attraction. Each shared laugh, each glance, and each gentle brush of hands carried a weight neither fully understood, as if the universe had placed them together for reasons beyond mere coincidence. By the time the last box was unloaded, the apartment looked transformed, but so had something inside both of them. Jake left that day carrying the warmth of companionship, a flicker of forbidden curiosity, and a sense that his life had shifted imperceptibly in a direction he couldn't yet name, leaving him questioning where simple kindness ended and deeper, more complicated feelings began. Jake couldn't shake the memory of that afternoon with Linda, and throughout the week, every text, every call from her carried an unexpected warmth that made his chest tighten with anticipation. When she invited him over for dinner, saying it was a small thank you for his help, he hesitated, knowing it might stir feelings he wasn't ready to face, but curiosity and a sense of responsibility drew him in. Arriving at her apartment, he noticed how she had arranged the space with care, soft lighting and subtle details that made the place feel intimate and welcoming. As they shared the meal, conversation started casually but quickly deepened, flowing into personal stories, hidden fears, and quiet confessions. Linda spoke about the loneliness she felt since her daughter had moved away, her voice tender, tinged with vulnerability that pulled at Jake in ways he hadn't expected. He found himself listening more intently than usual, offering comfort and understanding, and realizing that this was no longer just a simple favor, it had evolved into an emotional exchange that neither of them could ignore. There were moments when their hands brushed over the table, fleeting touches that left a warm, lingering sensation, and soft glances that spoke of something unspoken, a connection that was electric yet complicated. As the evening wore on and the wine eased the tension, Linda's words became more revealing, subtle admissions of longing and appreciation that made Jake's heart race. When it was time to leave, she lingered at the doorway, brushing a strand of hair from her face, her eyes meeting his with a softness that made him pause. I've missed having someone like you, she whispered, and Jake felt an undeniable pull, a magnetic force that was both thrilling and frightening. Walking home, he replayed every detail, the way her smile had softened when she laughed, the warmth in her eyes, the tremor in her voice when she admitted her feelings. He knew this connection was complicated, forbidden even, yet the thought of her alone and needing someone to care stirred something deep within him, a mix of longing, guilt, and unspoken desire. By the time he reached his apartment, Jake realized that what had begun as a simple act of help had transformed into an emotional entanglement, a delicate dance of hearts and unspoken emotions that neither time nor distance could easily undo, leaving him questioning boundaries, intentions, and the true nature of their connection. The following weekend, Linda asked Jake for more help, this time moving not just boxes but pieces of herself she couldn't carry alone, and though he hesitated, he felt drawn to her vulnerability and agreed without thinking. When he arrived, the apartment was a maze of furniture, memories, and scattered belongings, but the real work was in navigating the delicate tension that had grown between them since their dinner. Linda welcomed him with a tired smile, and as they lifted, carried, and arranged, conversation flowed in a way that was both light and deeply personal. She spoke of doubts, fears, and regrets, her voice shaking at moments, and Jake listened, offering comfort, advice, and a steady presence that seemed to matter more than any physical help. In a quiet pause, their hands touched briefly while adjusting a heavy frame, and the contact lingered longer than either expected, a spark that neither acknowledged but both felt intensely. The day moved quickly, each moment a mix of shared effort and silent understanding, laughter punctuating exhaustion, and glances that carried more than words could convey. When they paused to rest, Linda's eyes searched Jake's as if trying to read his thoughts, and her laugh carried a nervous edge, revealing an awareness of the emotions simmering just beneath the surface. As they stood together on the balcony for a short break, watching the city stretch out in evening lights, the world seemed smaller, private, and intimate, as if time itself had slowed to let them exist in this charged, delicate space. Jake felt the weight of desire, longing, and confusion pressing on him. He knew this was dangerous, that what they were building was a fragile, unspoken connection that could lead to heartbreak, yet he couldn't ignore it. Linda, too, seemed caught in the pull, her gestures tender, her voice soft, and her gaze lingering in ways that made Jake question his own feelings. By the end of the day, when the last box was set in place and the apartment finally looked orderly, neither spoke of the tension, but it hung between them like a quiet storm, impossible to dismiss. As Jake left, the memory of her smile, her vulnerability, and the unspoken bond they had formed stayed with him, a mixture of thrill and guilt, excitement and fear, leaving him to navigate the complexity of caring for someone so close yet emotionally forbidden, knowing that the simple act of helping had crossed into a realm of profound intimacy that neither of them could fully name or control. A few days later, Linda called Jake again, her voice trembling with frustration and exhaustion because the moving company had cancelled at the last minute, and she couldn't manage alone, and without hesitation, he agreed to come, feeling a pull he couldn't deny despite the complicated emotions swirling in his chest. When he arrived, she greeted him with a fragile smile that made his heart ache, exhaustion etched on her face, and as they worked together moving boxes, arranging furniture, and carefully placing fragile items, the air between them carried an intensity that neither could ignore, a mixture of care, longing, and unspoken tension. Rain began to fall unexpectedly as they carried a few last items to the balcony, and within moments, they were trapped by the sudden storm, drenched and laughing nervously at their misfortune, the world outside fading as they focused on each other in the intimate, confined space. They paused, catching their breath, and in that quiet, charged moment, Linda admitted softly, "I don't know why this keeps happening, or why I feel this way," her words carrying vulnerability and honesty that struck Jake deeply, and he realized that the bond between them had become more than mere friendship or gratitude. It was a connection of hearts, fragile and electric, built from shared vulnerability and quiet companionship. They didn't cross a physical line, but the emotional intimacy was undeniable, a mix of comfort, attraction, and unspoken understanding that left them both aware of the dangerous territory they were treading. As the rain softened outside, they shared a moment of silence, watching droplets streak the glass, feeling the closeness without needing words, each acutely aware of how much they had begun to mean to one another, and yet also knowing the consequences that even a hint of action could bring: guilt, heartbreak, and the risk of betrayal of the lives they both lived. When the storm passed, Jake left, his mind racing with conflicting emotions: the thrill of connection, the warmth of shared vulnerability, and the bittersweet ache of realizing that some bonds could exist only in the space between restraint and longing. Linda closed the door behind him with a quiet sigh, both of them acutely aware that what had begun as a simple act of help had transformed into a profound emotional entanglement, a tender, complicated, and forbidden intimacy that neither had anticipated, leaving them both changed, unsettled, and quietly yearning for a closeness that could not be fully acknowledged or fulfilled. That night, Jake replayed every detail: the rain, her words, the closeness, the shared laughter, and understood that their story had taken an unexpected turn, a delicate, emotional journey into uncharted territory where care, longing, and forbidden attraction intertwined, and the memory of that day, the storm, and the subtle, unspoken connection would linger, shaping the way he felt about her and leaving an indelible mark on both their hearts.